What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tearphone Orbital. V2. Not T2, V2. What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tearphone Orbital. So today, I'm going to talk about a hefty boy. This is the V2 steel, all steel body. This is from Korbanth, designed by Shadowfoil Props. This thing is beautiful. It is a hefty hilt. There's a lot going on inside of this hilt. There's a lot going on with the chassis. So I do want to come into Fusion and talk about the chassis design. And then I want to talk about how to use the hilt, because it is a little bit intricate how to insert the chassis into the hilt. You do need to use it a certain way. So I do want to go over that. And then obviously we will do a demo with it, right? So like I said, this is the V2, really, really unique. It's not unique. This is based on Luke's hilt. You know, I mean, what else can you say? It's steel, so this thing is super, super hefty. I'm a big fan of steel hilts. I like when a hilt feels substantial. It feels like a weapon to me, right? So this one was a lot of fun to design a chassis for. One of the things that I appreciate about Sam from Shadowfoil is that when he designs his hilts, he does design them with installation in mind. So this one was just that, right? It was designed with installation in mind. So one of the things that is always tricky about this particular version of this hilt is the switch section, right? So always when you're wiring up switches with a control box that's low like this, it can get a little tricky. But Sam did design a really, really unique spring plunger solution in here that I thought was really, really great. He did also design some really, really thoughtful PCB holders in this upper thin neck section, right? So I think they're Delrin PCB holders that actually thread into the thin neck section. And that way, you know, like I didn't have to go about like designing any kind of like custom, you know, PCB holder. They were already threaded and ready to go. And I could unthread them, wire up my PCBs, and then thread them in place. It was just really, really small details like that. I really, really, really appreciate, right? So anyhow, great hilt. Let's come into Fusion and talk a little bit about this chassis. And then of course we'll come up top, right? So let's head into Fusion. Okay, so here it is, right? So here is the chassis. I did this chassis in PETG Carbon Fiber, the main body of the chassis, rather. This window or panel that has been separated from the chassis itself was done in resin. So I've been doing this a lot lately, where I will separate my Greebly panel from the main chassis and print it in resin. Obviously, I cannot get this level of detail in FDM printing, so I still do this in resin, right? So the way that I do that is, and I've never really talked about this in depth, right? But I have a huge library of Greeblies that I pick and choose from. You know, once a month or every other month, I'll just start, like I'll create a half dozen or a dozen Greeblies, and I'll put them in my Greebly library, and then I'll pick and choose from them, right? So I'll arrange them on the chassis itself, and then I'll go back and cut the back of them. I've got to cut the back of them the same radius that is on the chassis itself. That way, obviously, this will fit perfectly onto the side of the chassis. But I also have to make sure that the Greeblies are on like some sort of panel. Otherwise, these are going to be floating, right? They're going to be floating in space, right? So a little bit of a different process than, you know, just straight resin printing, right? But as far as FDM printing goes, I'm just like so happy with what I'm getting from my Carbon X1. I really, really love the tactile feel of you know, PETG and carbon fiber PLA. It's really, really cool. So, and not to mention, like, it's just so much sturdier and stronger, obviously, right? So anyhow, 28 millimeter speaker at the bottom. I do have one single wire channel coming up from the bottom here. This is for my negative battery lead as well as my speaker leads. Profi board does sit here. I have two red square, rectangular LEDs rather, that sit here. Along the other side, I have a kill switch. On each side of that kill switch, I have 2 orange rectangular LEDs. So obviously, me being me, right, I have to put completely unnecessary LEDs on something, right? I could not leave this chassis bare, even though there is a crystal chamber that is attached to this chassis. I had to put something extra, right? So this is the first time I'm using this size orange LEDs, and I really like them. I've said this before, neopixels are cool and all, but I really like just a simple LED. To me, that just makes it look a little bit more functional. A little bit, even though it's, you know, we're talking about fake movie prop lightsabers here. I prefer LEDs, but that's just me, right? Along the other side, very simple greebly work. So this actually printed off in FDM, and I was happy with the level of detail we got with that. On board the chassis itself, I have 2 red button tactile switches. This is what those spring-loaded plunger switches in that control box, that's what they make a connection to. Okay. This hilt comes with 2 grenade sections, right? There is a crystal reveal grenade section and a regular section. There also is a crystal chamber. It is a really, really well thought out crystal chamber. We'll talk about this a little bit when we come up top, but this crystal chamber marries into this chassis with some set screws. I mean, a lot of thought was put into this crystal chamber because obviously I think Sam's intention with this crystal chamber was just that. I think it's meant to be secured to a chassis of some sort with these set screws. And I really, really thought that was a great touch to this crystal chamber. So that whole crystal chamber marries to the bottom of this chassis. I do have a single neopixel that is for some shine through for the lower crystal. These 2 holes on each side is where I bring my leads up to the upper emitter, okay? You will see a very, very small hole here. This is for, so the customer for this build specifically wanted a neopixel strip inside of the crystal chamber. I did not initially think this was going to be possible, but I was able to create a special neopixel strip holder inside the back of the crystal chamber. So that is where I brought the leads for that in, right? So just underneath that single neopixel, and then I bring them down into the board, right? Plenty of room in here in this cavity. Actually, I scratched that. This was very, very tight. There is a lot going on in here. Okay, so excuse me. All of these LEDs need resistors. Okay, so they all get their own resistor. I needed to resist the data line that came from that neopixel strip. There was just a lot going on in here. So this was a little bit of a cram foo underneath this board, but I made it work. If I did not have this cavity under here, I'm not quite sure I'd be able to get all that stuff in there, right? But really, really happy with how it came out, right? And that's it. So let's come up top, take a look at this guy. All right, so here it is. I can't, oh man, it's heavy. All right, so this is the V2 from Korbanth, designed by Shadowfoil Props. This is a heavy boy, right? This is a full steel body hilt. Beautiful, beautiful hilt, right? So the customer purchased this already stenciled and weathered from the factory or from Korbanth, okay? Really, really faithful, accurate representation of Luke's hilt. We've got our mystery chunk down here. Even that like machining marks are on the pommel down here. Really, really nice hilt, okay? So let's talk about this chassis, okay? So to get at your chassis, you want to unthread your pommel. So to unthread your pommel, you want to unthread this ring down here, okay? This kind of floats, this middle section. Take your chassis out. So this chassis can only go in one way, okay? This knurled thumb screw here does kind of clock the chassis. So there is a notch that goes down the spine of this chassis. You want to take note of that. That is where that knurled thumb screw will kind of guide the chassis in, okay? Also, I mean, when you're putting it in, you just gonna want to kind of take note of where your switches are, and that's where you want to put it, where the control box is, right? So here's the chassis, okay? I did my usual pass of pewter rub and buff on this. I did paint some of the accents. Profi V2 build, 28 millimeter bass speaker. And that's it, right? So there is that crystal chamber, really, really nice crystal chamber. Sam also does a great job designing crystal chambers. I've talked about this at length. The Phoenix Props Jedi Killer that recently came out, I believe Sam designed the crystal chamber for that, and that was an absolutely beautiful crystal chamber. So this crystal chamber is really, really nice as well. It's two-tone, so we've got steel and brass, two crystals pointing at each other. Really, really thoughtfully designed crystal chamber. So this bottom crystal chamber holder has set screws in it. That is what is set screwed or tightened down to the chassis itself. Then this outer core has set screws as well, and that is what tightens to that brass inner core. So it's just really, really a smart design, in my opinion, right? So there's no like need to epoxy anything together. None of this is like glued together. It's all like really, really thoughtfully designed, in my opinion, right? PCB up top. So I didn't go with just a regular simple blade side PCB up top. I wanted this to be able to light outside of the hilt. So I went ahead and put a Shadowfoil PCB up top, of course, right? And that's it. So let's put a battery in it. So to use the hilt, take note of your negative side. So negative side is towards the speaker, spring side is your negative. Flat part of your battery rested in that battery tray. So this was already on. There are those two orange rectangular LEDs. Those are pulsing. There are those two red rectangular LEDs. Those are their own blade in the blade config. Here is that, this is probably going to get washed out on camera. Behind those crystals is a 2020 neopixel strip. So I created a neopixel strip like holder out of like FDM FDM carbon fiber. And it is just kind of affixed to the back of the crystal chamber. Okay, and that kind of just hides it in that fashion. Right, so we get some animation behind the crystal. And that's it, right? There's that lit emitter. Really, really awesome design.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
All right. So once you're ready, you've got your battery in. So like I said, take note of where your switches are on the chassis. You want to kind of line them up with the control box. And line the notch on the chassis up with that knurled thumb screw. Slide the chassis all the way up into place. Thread your pommel all the way on until it stops. And then you're ready to go. All right. So I think this is a blade plug. Actually, no. So there is a decorative emitter, blade plug, I guess you'd call it. And there is a regular emitter for your blade, right? So let's come down to the bottom. Right. So the hilt came with a plethora of accessories, right? So here's that crystal reveal grenade section, right? So to the customer, if you want to swap that out, you can. For the demo, I'm just going to keep this regular one on. Here is that blade holder, right? If you want to put a blade in your hilt. So you take off that decorative blade plug, blade holder, put this one on. So another thing about this hilt, right? So one of the things that is notorious about thin neck blades like this is they are usually very, very shallow blade holders. This is a nice deep blade holder, right? 1-inch blade. So let's get a blade. So like I said, 1-inch blade holder. You want to take your blade, rest it on those PCB pins. So we've got 3 set screws that go along the radius of the blade here. So you want to tighten all of those equally. If I could stop shaking. Too much coffee today. Tighten all of those equally. You should be good to go. This is a heavy hilt. This might be heavier than the Korbanth. I don't know. Let's see what else we put on here. It's that rotoscope. Oh, let me tighten that down a little bit more. One more.
Watch this.
Watch what?
This thing is heavy. All right, so that's it. That is the.
Lord Vader.
Let's see Vader's blade on. There we go. That's it. So that is the Vee Two from Korbanth, designed by Shadowfoil Props. So you know, I feel like I've had it's been a Shadowfoil heavy week for me. I've had a bunch of hilts that were designed by Sam come across my desk lately. So this has been a really, really great hilt to install on. Like I said, very, very thoughtful design cues on this one, right? Very, very heavy hilt. It feels like a premium hilt. And having that, I don't want that thing to roll off my desk because I'm not wearing shoes. If that falls on my toe, it will break my toe, right? Not to mention it might damage something. So, yeah, so, you know, a lot of very, very thoughtful design cues went into this one. It feels like a premium hilt. It's got a great crystal reveal. I mean, how could you go wrong, right? So anyhow, to the customer, thank you very much for your patience and for trusting me with your install. If anyone has any questions about this particular install or anything really, please do not be a stranger. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.